of the Viva Albertos podcast. As always, I am your host, Jake Wood, and joining me tonight is fellow site writer Gabe Simons. Scott Plaza is playing hooky tonight with his in-laws, but you know he'll find a way to make time for his other shows. It's fine. I'm not bitter. It's fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. Tonight, we are going to have some very interesting discussion points, such as we're going to talk about the Brendan Donovan market and the update as players and homes continue to kind of go off the board and what that means for the Cardinals all-star utility man. We're also going to talk about the VEB top 20, the countdown that's kind of going on right now on the site as we count up, down, not really how to phrase it, of the top 20 prospects as voted on by the readers of the site. And then finally, we're going to finish off with a discussion about a couple of key spring training battles we will be keeping track of over the next month or so before the team breaks camp and heads north to take on Tampa Bay on opening day. Gabe, how you doing tonight, man? Good to see you.
I'm doing actually great. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Great.
How you doing?
Well, let's jump into it then. A couple weeks ago, ESPN's Jeff Passan tweeted about the San Francisco Giants' urgency to add a second baseman to their infield, mentioning Cardinals' Brendan Donovan as well as the Cubs' Nico Horner as potential fits. Fast forward to this weekend, and the Giants have added contact specialist Luis Ariz to play second base for them. That kind of eliminates one of the reported front runners for Brendan Donovan. Seattle appears to be content letting their kids play at second and third to start the season. Rather than paying the price tag the Cardinals have remained resolved to asking for in return. And also tonight, Eugenio Suarez just signed a deal to return to Cincinnati. Not that Cincinnati was a reported destination, but that is a name that's kind of been floating around in the same circles as Brendan Donovan and in that market. So, Gabe, I wanted to ask you what the likelihood is that Donovan remains with St. Louis to start the season. And do you see any other, reasonable fits out there somewhere else?
Well, I would say the odds that he returns feel like they're increasing by the day he keeps not getting traded. And I think Bloom recently said that if we make it to spring camp, the odds are kind of low that he gets traded, in fact, because he doesn't want that hanging over spring and the team in general. But I mean, the Mariners are clearly probably the number one likelihood as far as where he's going to get traded. Somebody posted I think the GM, actually, I just looked at this on the comments for Viva Albertos, saying that they still had one more move in them. And it just kind of seems like that probably isn't through free agency. You never know. But so I'm not going to say it's unlikely. Until spring camp comes, I would say over 50%. But Mariners would probably be the number one. Clearly, the Giants are no longer on the board. I wonder if, I don't know, the Cardinals were asking for Bryce Eldridge or something. I don't know what they were asking for, or what the Giants were willing to part with, but they weren't willing to get anybody else either. So it wasn't just like a Cardinals thing. And they kind of, in my opinion, settled for a rise. But that's neither here nor there. And the Reds, you mentioned Suarez, they were never really going to trade for Donovan, so that's good at least. That Suarez is removed from a team where they could have traded for Donovan and put Donovan at third base in theory or wherever. So that's the positive impact of Suarez signing with the Reds, I suppose. But yeah, no, I still think it's over 50%. Yeah. But yeah, as we get closer to spring camp, certainly I would say I'm less and less certain. It keeps going down a little bit. Not the worst case scenario from at least a enjoyment perspective this upcoming season. He'll play mostly left field, I imagine, and that means our outfield goes from yikes to more watchable, certainly. Not that Donovan's defense is providing much, but he's enough out there, and his offense is obviously why we'd be excited to watch him play. So just as a fan, I guess.
Right.
I mean, it's hard for me to be mad we get to watch Brendan Donovan continue to play baseball. But I understand that for the long-term future, it's better if he's traded.
Yeah, for me, I agree with you. I think there is like a path to where Brendan Donovan makes sense still on this team. Obviously, with the trades of Nolan Arenado and Wilson Contreras, obviously things are opened up a lot more now. There's still uncertainty around whether or not Lars Nootbaar is going to be ready for opening day, and so you could kind of see where Donovan would fit into that left field spot pretty easily and would not affect either Nolan Gorman or JJ Weatherholt. And even if once Nootbaar returns, you can still kind of use Brendan Donovan as that, quote unquote, rotating day off for other guys. Obviously, Gorman's dealt with back issues. Nootbaar is hurt constantly. JJ being his first, run with the big league club, it makes all the sense in the world to not kind of put too much on his plate right away. Not saying that he wouldn't physically be able to handle that because that's what these guys train for year round, but still, I would assume that the Cardinals don't want to put too much on his plate too soon, and so I still think that you could use Donovan, and the Cardinals use the DH spot as a rotational day off for players as well. They don't like to really, attribute that to one player specifically, but still, I think his versatility really helps the Cardinals, at least in the short term. I know there are a lot of fans who are clamoring for the idea of Donovan being traded, but Bloom has been pretty consistent with, we're open to listening to something that makes sense, and if something does wind up making sense, we're not afraid to execute or pull the trigger, as evidenced by Arenado, Contreras, and Gray this offseason. Those were, I'm sure, not easy deals to pull off for Bloom, but still was able to find a way to make something make sense for both sides. So if it is indeed Seattle, and Seattle's willing to step up and meet the ask for Brendan Donovan, which has been, quote unquote, set a very high ask for him, then if you get the return that you're looking for, no harm, no foul in all of this process. But I want to remain, as objective as possible in saying that it's not the worst thing in the world if Donovan returns for at least the start of the season. The Cardinals would still maintain some leverage in those negotiations with other teams should they take it to the trade deadline. Um, you know, what about Boston, Gabe? That wasn't a team that that you had mentioned. Would would the Cardinals, line up with Boston one more time for a deal? They're still looking for kind of a middle infield / third base option to plug in their infield. Would it be the weirdest thing in the world to see like two teams consummate 3 different deals in the same offseason? Like, what would your thoughts be on the Boston connection? Because apparently they're still kind of looking, after Suarez went to Cincinnati, still kind of looking in that market as well.
I mean, I assume that Bloom isn't necessarily looking for like specific types of prospects, and he's just looking for value. So if Boston is willing to like give up like big arms or even a big bat, maybe, yeah, I guess we'd make 3 trades with Boston in one offseason. I don't think I can remember an instance where anything like that's happened. Certainly not with the Cardinals, but like with any
I
team where they
certainly
just
can't.
traded with the
Yeah.
same. I don't know if that's happened, but I mean, just a unique situation clearly where I guess the 2 teams just were able to connect. And and most of them weren't actually Bloom's guys. I know a lot of people would think that was the case, but a lot of them were acquired after
Right.
Bloom left already. So I don't even think it's a thing of him favoring his own acquisitions, but he certainly implemented whatever system they used to continue acquiring guys, if that makes sense. And maybe that's why he's
Yeah.
partial to those players. But I guess my question is, from Bloom's perspective, is his attitude going to be? And I think I know what you're going to say, but so I've set the standard for the prospects, right? They need to reach the standard for me to trade Donovan, or when we get like towards the end of spring training camp, if the Mariners go, I'm just using the Mariners as an example, but it could be the Red Sox too. This is our final offer,
Sure.
and then Bloom's like, well, this is the best I'm going to do, so I'll take your offer. It's a good offer, like like it might not necessarily reach the standard like what he wanted to do, but I'm curious what his attitude ultimately is, because it could be a little bit of a bluff where he thinks he can hold out and get a better offer ultimately, but maybe one of the teams puts forth an offer where he's like, I'm not going to do better at the deadline than this. I'm going to make the trade, even though it's not quite what I was hoping for. So what do you think will
Right.
Bloom? I don't want to say settle because I don't think he'll settle, but I'm wondering if he'll
Right.
accept a little bit lower than the high standard he's setting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Eventually,
I think that you're right. I think that if it comes across as where they're getting something interesting in return, I think that he's apt to be inclined to continue to engage in those discussions. I don't know whether or not it would get across the finish line. So let's say like I've seen people say that like, oh, if he's getting 90% of the value of Donovan, then he should be willing to take that. You know, I don't know, because that's like hypothetical. Is like I can't really tell you what I think of something unless I see names, and then I can kind of give you a better read on how I interpret that or what I think of
right?
it. But as far as like if he gets to 95% of the asking price, yeah, I think it'd be kind of silly to hold out for that little extra 5%, because you still got, a great amount of value, and you kind of held strong on your position until you got something in return that will ultimately make the Cardinals better in the long run. And I think that's the ultimate goal in all of this. And so as long as you accomplish that, then I think most Cardinals fans will be happy. Obviously, you have, the casual fan who's going to be disappointed regardless whenever if and when Donovan is traded. Because, for people like me and a lot of other people like us in the media do enjoy watching Brendan Donovan play on a regular basis. He's a really good baseball player. But at the same time, we have to be honest and recognize where the Cardinals are in their competitive cycle. And because of that, if they're not willing to extend Brendan Donovan, the best thing to do is get the best assets in return for him, assuming that it even comes close to that ask. Now, I'm not saying that Bloom needs to hold out for better than what he asked for. It seems as though that the market has kind of ebbed and flow in different directions, and there are still some takers available, but I don't think that it's quite as robust of a market as it was even a few weeks ago, whenever we were hearing a lot more smoke about this. And that just kind of naturally occurs throughout the offseason, obviously, because teams make decisions, teams pivot back and forth. And, they always use the term fluid. It's a fluid situation. And I'm sure that, Bloom has said that he wants to use spring training as kind of like that deadline or cutoff. And so, you know, we're about 2 weeks away from knowing ultimately what the fate of the Brendan Donovan saga winds up being this offseason, and whether or not the Cardinals are able to get really good young talent in return for him. And kind of on that topic of good young talent, let's kind of switch over to I'm sorry, not position battles. Give us a quick breakdown, Gabe, of where the current top prospect countdown is at, and who's on it so far.
All right. Well, number one was a fairly straightforward because he's a top 5, top 10 prospect depending on the site overall, not just in the Cardinal system. Just JJ Weatherall, who should be on the Major League roster on opening day, in my personal opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion. I think his number one vote reflects that. He might struggle at first, but I think he'll end up being a Rookie of the Year candidate. You usually in a top 20 prospect list, you're not going to find that guy. So he's a fairly straightforward one. And number 2 is Liam Doyle, who has ace upside. He hasn't pitched yet. Or actually he did pitch, but he pitched like in relief last year. And I don't really count that, honestly. I think that was just to get his arm
Just a little bit.
fresh to maybe, just to get used to pitching in like August or whatever, maybe just a little bit. And
Well, I
he
do
might,
know. Sorry, not to cut you off real quick. I do know that as part of like what Doyle negotiated was that whatever team selected him, he wanted to be able to pitch in the middle of the 2025 season. So like whoever selected him would allow him to throw again. So I just to throw that little tidbit out there. I know that was part of the negotiation. Obviously, they didn't push him very far or let him go more than 2 or 3 innings, but that was a part of it.
okay.
Continue.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, no, but no, you're good. No, good. I didn't know that actually, so thank you for putting that in there. But yeah, Doyle is, I would argue a tier below Weatherall, but a lot of that might just be because he hasn't pitched yet. We haven't seen him, as a starter in the minor leagues. And then number 3 is the Reniel Rodriguez, who might be the best of all just because he's so young and he advanced from the rookie leagues all the way to high A. And I don't think he quite hit in high A, but he wasn't overmatched because he didn't strike out a bunch or anything like that. And then I believe number 4 is Quinn Matthews, who we're very well familiar with, who we all expected to debut last year. A
Interesting.
consequence of that is that its MLB readiness is like in a month or two. If he doesn't manage to make the opening day roster, which I don't expect because we made a bunch of moves to where we didn't have to do that, and
Right.
maybe he shows a little bit more control before we call him up. But the point is, he's the next guy after Weatherholt on this list, I believe, who would be in the major leagues, except for somebody who's coming later, but we might mention that later.
I agree.
And then number 5 is who am I forgetting? I don't have the list in front of me. Who did we just put in number 5? Oh, Joshua Bias. Oh my God. He's another guy who might make his MLB appearance this year. It's really fun that a lot of these guys in the top 5, top 6 are guys who we might see this year, which I don't, the last few years hasn't really been the case for the most part. And then number 6, technically it's not known yet, but by the time this comes out, Leonardo Bernal has won the number 6 vote essentially. And he's going to be in AAA at some point. They might start him in AA just because of the catcher depth, and because he kind of finished low last year, but he's probably maybe the most well-rounded catcher in this. I mean, it's tough to say because there's so many catchers, so many options. That's where we stand with the top 6 right now. I mean, certainly I think the best top 6 that we've had since I've done this, this is I think year 4. So I don't think we've had a better top 6 than this, but I could be wrong. What are your thoughts on those top 6?
And so obviously the two things that stand out to me is the amount of players that are obviously near major league ready. Between all of those players aside from Doyle and Rodriguez are AAA or above in Weatherholt's case, looking to earn a job out of spring training. I think that it's interesting, and I don't know that it necessarily puts pressure on Ivan Herrera to kind of take off with that catching position, but I do think it's interesting how much high-end catching talent the Cardinals have in their system currently, and it kind of makes me wonder, just how patient they're going to be with his catching process. Obviously, we'll kind of get into that in a little bit, but for me, I'm really curious to see where this goes, and that kind of leads me to my next question: is who's one prospect in the remaining pool of players, obviously in the Cardinals system, that you, Gabe, are kind of eager to see where they land at in the rankings?
Actually, one of the guys is going to go on I do a comparable player poll where I compare 2 players who haven't been on the voting yet just to see how people feel so I can know when to add them. And I'm about to put, I'm going to not pronounce his first name right. Yoiker Fajardo. I'm going to put him on that comparable player poll.
Yeah.
I'm very curious what the fans think because I said it basically right. Okay, thank you.
It's like
But yeah, no, I'm curious where he
the phonetic I've seen is like Joiker, but it's
Yoiker. Close. Okay. I'll take close.
Joiker Fajardo.
But
Yeah,
no, yeah,
something like that. You're there.
I'm in the ballpark. Or hopefully. But
Yeah.
but I'm excited to see where he falls mostly because and Tanner Franklin, honestly, who he's up against, because it feels like they have a wide range of where they could land. They could be top 10 ultimately, which would be quite the leap because he hasn't been in the voting yet. But or they could be outside the top 20, which I don't expect. Which I think Fajardo is out of the top 20 for our friends over at the Cardinal Nation, with Kyle Reese, but Franklin's in the top 15. But both of them have more upside where they
Right.
ultimately will place than typically seen at the ranking, which could be 13, 14, 15, out of the list. So I'm really excited to see where they land personally. 2 recent acquisitions, specifically, and somebody who also isn't in the voting that I actually thought of, I think you might have thought I thought Crooks when I said another guy who might make the major leagues. I actually was going to say Nathan Church, who technically is a prospect, which I don't think I realized at first.
Yeah.
He hasn't hit 50 days. He hasn't hit 125 at bats or whatever. I'm probably going to end up putting up against an outfielder, and he might be in the top 20 as well. So it'll be interesting to see where Nathan Church places as well, honestly.
Yeah, I think that for me, I'm really curious to see where like Jesus Baez lands because I think that the upside of that kind of profile is going to be really interesting. Like he's really interesting to me. The swing decisions are something that really has to be cleaned up. But if he's able to really hone in on pitches swinging at pitches in the zone and really eliminate some of that chase, he's got really big time power, like 65 grade power in that bat. And if you put him over at third base, like that's a third baseman of the future type player the Cardinals really haven't had in quite some time. And I think that's a really, under the radar, exciting player to kind of keep track of this season. Obviously, again, kind of referencing where the Cardinals are in their competitive cycle, I think a lot of fans are going to have their eyes kind of locked in and glued on what's happening in the minor leagues. And I'm very thankful that we have a really great network of people who really dig into and pay attention to the minor leagues as we do try to do our best to also stay as locked in on those players. Obviously, others are a little more niche focused towards those younger players and prospects, but I think that we'll have a really good idea or understanding of kind of who emerges this year and kind of who's going to take those next steps in their journey to St. Louis. And that all can kind of start coming up in spring training. And speaking of spring training, position battles are always a fun topic too at this time of year. And for you, Gabe, I'm curious, what are a couple spots on the major league roster that you're kind of looking towards for position battles that might take place over the next 7-8 weeks of camp before the Cardinals break for St. Louis against Tampa?
I mean, certainly starting pitching, and there might even be 2 spots open. I think it's Liberatore's a sure thing, McGreevy's a sure thing, Dustin May's a sure thing. Is anybody else a sure thing? I think Palante, if he pitches well in spring, will make the opening day roster as a starting pitcher. But I think if he doesn't show something that makes them think he's improved, he might get kicked out, especially if Dobbins or Fitz, if they're healthy enough anyway, just dominate. Or Quinn Matthews, honestly, I don't know. There's a lot of options that could get the 4th or 5th spots, but I think the 5th spot is just almost literally wide open. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think that it's
Did you catch that?
important because I asked Ollie at winter warm up about their inclusion of a 6th spot in the rotation like they did early on last year. And he kind of went into detail about how even in the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season, guys are still continuing to try to ramp up to get themselves, ready for the season. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that he said, like last year, they will, strategically implement that 6-man rotation in certain spots whenever there are less off days kind of, grouped together. And so that'll be kind of interesting to see in another interesting way that the Cardinals can kind of evaluate some of their pitching, the young pitching options that they have, the depth to kind of see where they might fit in. That's kind of why I'm curious if they might. I thought originally Andre Palante might fit into that spot, but assuming he has a normal offseason and kind of is able to reclaim that 2024 version of himself, like he feels he's confident he can do going into next season, then I would be more curious to see if like a Kyle Leahy, fits into that Steven Matz role where he's not only spot starting, but also is available as a weapon out out of the bullpen, and Ollie can kind of use him and move him back and forth, and that kind of as that chess piece in that sixth spot in the rotation, which would allow for Richard Fitz to also be the 5 starter in that scenario, in my opinion. And I think that Fitz has like 6 pitches, and they're all unique, and he can land all of them for strikes, and so he definitely has that starter's mold. A quick shout out to the Redbirds on the Arch. We had Tyler on a couple weeks ago, known by the name of Redbird Farmhands. That's his handle on Twitter. And they had Hunter Dobbins on their show. And one thing that I learned that was really interesting was that Hunter told them that his body does not respond well to pitching out of the bullpen. And so he is likely a starter only option. So if he's not starting in the major leagues, he'll be down in AAA starting in that rotation. But there is also some kind of health questions for him, at least at the beginning of the season, as he kind of progresses back from that ACL tear that he suffered last year. And so I kind of wonder if they might slow play him a little bit into the season, and then kind of see where they are, maybe come early May, and how things are going there. So how about another position that you're kind of paying attention to for spring?
Well, I was going to make the point with your 6 starter thing. I don't think the Cardinals' first week where they don't have an off day is until late April. So that might throw a little, I don't think they're going to go with the 6 starter if they have an off day that week. You know what I'm saying? That throws a little bit of a complication, because I think last year we started and we didn't have that many off days for a while. And that's why Matz was the 6 starter, and then nobody got hurt. And then he became more of a swingman. Well, to go back to your question though, I don't know if this is a battle. I know a lot of people don't believe it is, but right field, Jordan Walker. I'm wondering if.
Interesting.
I mean, here's the thing. I don't know how. I know what they're saying publicly. I don't know. It just to me, it makes sense to send him down. So, but it depends on what he looks like in spring training to a certain extent. I feel like if he looks bad in spring, I don't know how you keep him on the major league roster. I just don't. I feel like he has to kind of earn his way. And I know spring training doesn't mean that much. Well, whatever. But I do feel like after a couple of years where he struggled, and then if he also struggles in spring training, I feel like you got to make him hit his way back on a AAA. To me, I would look at right field as a position battle. I know the Cardinals might not. And I guess the other guy would be maybe Nathan Church or something, which a lot of people want him to be the starter instead of Victor Scott, which I highly disagree with. But maybe Church could be the right fielder
too.
I just think Scott had too good of a year, and you got to give him a chance to show first off, to repeat his defense or get close, and also see if his bat improves. I mean, because he seems to believe that he made improvements, and I want to give him a shot to do it, certainly. And if he looks the same after April and May, okay, then maybe he could become a 4th outfielder. But I feel like, I don't know. Anyway, maybe that's worth addressing, because some people look at center field as a position battle. I personally don't. But I mean, I'm gonna beat this drum a lot, but I do think, Jordan Walker needs to kind of prove himself a little bit in the spring. And I feel like I'm not as extreme as other people, where they say ignore spring, he should go to the minors, which is a position I certainly understand. But I don't know. I need to see something from him to show that he deserves to be on the opening day roster, personally. So I look at that as a position battle.
That's interesting. I don't know that I see anyone quite in the realm of being able to, I understand that there are champions of Nathan Church in the fan base who would like to see him try to earn that spot. For me, in my very, loosely termed ability to analyze young players, do I see a player who's anything more than, genuinely a 4th outfielder? And that's not necessarily to knock him or say that he's not capable of playing every day. It's just that
I was gonna say, this has less to do with Church than it does for Walker for me, just for the record. At Church, no, I was gonna say this has less to do with Nathan Church, and it has more to do with Jordan Walker. For me, I'm not Nathan Church is not, kicking Jordan Walker out. It's more Jordan Walker needs to show he belongs in the major leagues for me. As soon as he does, I'm okay with pushing Nathan Church to the side. Just want to set that. It's not like an argument that Nathan Church is got more potential or anything than Walker. It's just I think he's the next guy, right? I don't know who the next guy would be if it's not Nathan Church, unless they make a signing, which I'm a little less sure will happen at this point because unless I get Randall Grichuk or something, I don't know. The options are dwindling. We'll say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Miguel Andujar still exists out there, and it's still a name that could offer
I don't like that.
some balance to a lefty heavy group. So that name, obviously, the Cardinals have been linked to him. There's known interest there. I know that like having him in the outfield at the same time as Jordan Walker, and neither of those players particularly rate out very well as defenders doesn't excite a lot of people who are overly optimistic about outfield defense. Obviously, Victor Scott then would come into a more highlighted role there in center field, but also if Nathan Church were to remain on the roster on opening day, that's obviously a defensive replacement late in games you could kind of turn to and could shore up some of those defensive question marks at least late in games. Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties where my internet just completely fell out from underneath me. This is going to be a process, and I do apologize to you guys. We're going to try to work through this and grow together, and eventually it'll get to a point where we want it to be. But for right now, the power of editing, this will all look like nothing really ever happened, I hope. Assuming I'm, worth anything when it comes to whenever it comes to any kind of editing, that is. All right, can you at least hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm just gonna have to go video list for for the time being, just so we can finish this. Um, Once again, very sorry about the this all dropping out. There were some kinks expected, and we'll try to work through them as we go along. But just to kind of once again try to finish my thought on Jordan Walker, it appears that the Cardinals are destined to have him start in right field on opening day. They believe that the Cardinals believe that. In order for Jordan to succeed, he has to hit major league pitching. He has to take on the best of the best and adjust to that level of competition. They don't seem to feel like at AAA he's really going to gain anything it's only going to be a waste of time. I know, Gabe, you probably have some different thoughts about that, but go ahead if you would do so.
Well, I suppose my main argument would be he hasn't actually hit AAA pitching. So I feel like he should do that first. He has a below average hitting line against AAA pitching, which is crazy to think about, but I don't know. I get what you're saying. I just feel like otherwise, like why does I feel like the argument that he needs MLB pitching to improve is asking why does AAA even exist then? I don't know. I just also, I mean, I don't know. I'm just, I don't, I know what you're saying. I don't agree with the argument that he has to see MLB pitching to improve personally. Um,
And
last
just to
year,
be clear, that's the Cardinals'
what we
stance on things.
think.
That's that. Yeah, yeah.
We,
Well, it's so like I don't know. I'm not an expert, so for me,
I get the argument. I just feel like you're gonna see some major league quality pitches in AAA too. I know it's not going to be consistent, but it's not like, and I know there's a gap. I get it. Okay, and I'm not asking that Walker be in the AAA the whole year at all. I feel like we have an option. We should use it. There's no reason to save it again. He has 2 years, 44 years of service time. There's a argument, honestly, in that direction too, to send him down because, I mean, I don't know. You can get you. And I feel like the arguments for keeping him in the majors are essentially, well, he has to be in the majors to improve, and that's almost the only argument that you can make, really, because from a service time standpoint, you should send him down. From a performance standpoint, you should send him down. And again, spring training, I know, you don't put too much stock in a month of spring training games, but if you look at that as like AAA competition more than MLB competition, and if he just goes guns blazing, okay, I'll change my stance. We still have 30 something games and 70 plate appearances or something like that, where Walker could be look like a different player, look like he's different on offense.
a
And I
decent enough
acknowledge that.
sample size, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's in ordinary circumstances, I would not put a lot of faith in it, and I'm not really putting a lot of faith in it either by having to make the major league team, but like at least I'm getting a sign that something is different. But yeah, if he just has an okay spring training where he strikes out a lot and he's still chasing every slider and stuff like that, I find it difficult to justify him not getting sent to AAA, letting him hopefully dominate AAA competition for a stretch, and then you promote him, and that might help his confidence too, because he hasn't actually dominated anywhere since 2022. I mean, I can't imagine. The definition of insanity is just repeating doing the same thing over and over and over. And if he is in the major leagues and he continues to be bad, I just like how long are we gonna? We have an option. Why won't we use it? I get why we didn't use it last year. I do get why we didn't use it last year, but I feel like at the point where he is struggling again this year, I don't know. I just don't see a lot of utility in the option. So yeah, I really am. I'm hoping he looks like a different player in spring training. So this argument is moot. But I personally would send him to AAA. That'd be my plan, and he would have to prove otherwise for that not to be the case. And then if he manages to hit in AAA, and maybe an injury forces away on the roster, something like that, then okay. But I don't know. He was like so bad last year, and
I think that the Cardinals promoting Casey Chenoweth to have him there to work with Jordan Walker on a daily basis is at least a reasonable change. You know, when we saw him come back from
Yeah.
his little injury stint and in the second half and kind of have that short little hot streak, you know, Walker did accredit his work with Casey to that improvement, and so perhaps having that voice in his ear could be a change. You know, when they talk about players getting like you know, change of scenery, it's also a change of voice in players' heads. And so maybe that could be something, a slight
Well,
change that could lead to better results and better production. So like, I don't think that it is the same as last season, but also you know, they've talked about him making the changes and the adjustments in the off season,
yeah.
and then carrying those into the season, you know, this coming season. Whereas, you know, they were talking about a lot last year. He was trying to make the adjustments in season and how much more difficult of a process that is to do and to implement and kind of get your body into that type of muscle memory pattern. Whereas now in the off season, you don't have the stress of competition on a nightly basis, and you can just focus on, you know, the repetition and the development of creating that new movement pattern that the Cardinals are hoping that he's able to make that adjustment to go forward. All that being said, still has to show it on the field, still has to show something tangible improvements, you know, for I think the Cardinals and for the fans both to kind of really be okay with that being the plan in right field on opening day going
I would also
forward.
say, hypothetically speaking, if Casey's making that big of a difference, we'd see it in spring training. And he was kind of saying the same stuff last year. I mean, I went to warm up. He was saying that like he made changes, and it's just kind of like the narrative you have. Like I get it. I know what you're saying, but I I'm not even like questioning that he can't improve. I'm just saying that like I don't know. I until I see physical evidence, I think he should go to AAA. And I understand that Casey being there might change things. I don't feel like hitting coaches make like that much difference, but where simply Casey being in the major leagues is going to suddenly make him a good hitter. But we'll see. Like I said, if it does, then we'll see something in spring training, I believe. So I wouldn't even say that
Yeah,
disproves
yeah,
what I'm
no,
saying, really.
I'm not saying it as a given, but given what how the Cardinals are stancing themselves, like the stance they're taking on top of like what they're promoting with like what he's attempting to do and attempting to prove. He went to Driveline this offseason. He's, you know, doing all of the other little things that players do in the offseason to try to improve themselves. So like, I think at this point, it's really just, we have to see it,
Sure.
you know, in order to buy into it, because just hearing about it, I fully understand where yours and like other fans' criticism of it comes into, is like, yeah, we've heard this before. It's just the same old story. Like, you got to show me on the field before I can really like invest and buy into it. Fully with you on that aspect. I'm just saying, let's wait and see what it looks like in spring training. You know, does it look tangibly different? Do the underlying metrics support the changes, any changes that he might make? You know, let's put it in the wait and see bucket before we make that determination. If he gets into spring, like if we get to the last week of spring training, it looks exactly the same. There's no tangible change. All the underlying metrics still suggest that, you know, he's just about the same of what he was last year. Then I think that, you know, AAA should be a more open discussion than what it seems to be right now. It seems like they're not even really considering it unless he completely falls flat on his face. And if he does in spring training, then I suppose it becomes a more realistic path for him. You know, I think there are a couple other places for me specifically that I'm intrigued to watch, you know, position battles play out. You know, JJ Weatherhold at second base. I think second base is going to be an interesting place. I don't know that anything is necessarily guaranteed for him as well. I think the Cardinals want him to take advantage of the opportunity. I think they want him to win that job out of spring training going into opening day. Doesn't mean it's given. I think third base is really interesting. You know, does Gorman earn that opportunity? Does Sajasi earn that opportunity? You know, if Donovan is still here, is he going to be the starting third baseman? You know, what about left field? How does that shake out? Does Donovan just automatically get that? Will Newt be ready? You know, you mentioned Nathan Church. Does he take another offensive step forward? You know, what about a Josh Baez? Does he so overwhelmingly impress in a small sample size that perhaps the Cardinals consider putting him in left field on opening day. I think it's really far-fetched, but it seems to be, if he's there in camp and if he has a monster camp, it can't be outside of the realm of possibility. If they're willing to, start JJ's clock this year, why wouldn't they be willing to with Baez if he completely just shows I know he hasn't gotten to AAA yet.
Yeah.
So it feels like they would be making the same mistake over again. I totally hear you, but we can't ignore that might be a possibility just for the sake of the argument.
I know. I think I think JJ in AAA last year, no matter what he does in spring, I guess unless he's just like looks like the worst hitter ever, he's making my opening day roster. It's not a competition for me. He's got second baseman for me. I know that seems slightly contradictory with what I said about Walker, but I mean that's sort of like me treating spring training like a little bit of an indicator, but not much. And for me, Weather was so good in AAA last year that he's ready. And if he's going to struggle in the first month or two, I feel like it was inevitable that he would struggle in the first month or two. So why not have it happen immediately, and then eventually he'll adjust because he's that good of a hitter. For me, second base is not a competition. Weatherhold's my second baseman. I'm giving him as many games, maybe not like, maybe he sits a few more times than normal because of the hamstring concerns or whatever. That might be past. I'm not really sure. But yeah, no, Weatherhold, second base is not a competition for me. If Donovan's still here, left field's not a competition for me because I'm making Donovan my left fielder as well because of that. Because there's too many players who could play. Third base is very much a competition, though. I would lean towards Gorman just because of his power potential. We don't really have anybody else on the major league team, at least, that has that kind of power. Obviously, the strikeouts are frustrating to watch, and the defense might be rough. I'm not sure. Hopefully, I do believe he had a little bit of the yips, so I don't think he was as bad as he showed at parts of last year because his throws were just like so out of whack with what I think they would normally be. It just seemed like a guy who would like had some mental aspect hit him, and hopefully he got over that. And with a fresh year, and just like okay, this is your job for I don't know a month or two. Relax. Don't worry about the throws as much. Maybe he'll look better. I don't know, but maybe he'll look better than second base he has in the past. So Gorman would be my 1A, I suppose, for third base. But yeah, you could go Shijase, you could go Fermin. There's a lot of options for third base. But yeah, Weatherhold's my second baseman. And if Donovan's still here, he's my left fielder. Things obviously change if Donovan is traded, though.
Right. And to your point about Gorman, I did want to touch on this. I think the Cardinals seem to be inclined to give Gorman that another full season to kind of show what he can do. I did want to highlight Gorman's WRC plus by month because this is my big hesitancy with him is just how dramatic the ups and downs really are. If he can eliminate some of the deep valleys in his profile, I'm more apt to giving him a little bit more time and a little bit and kind of, dripping out that process a little bit more. In March, April, his WRC plus was 76. In May, it was 45. In June, it was 142. In July, it was 110. In August, it was 105. In September, it was 24.
Yeah.
So you cannot have, as a major league player, you cannot exist with such extreme peaks and valleys in your profile. Now, if his valleys were, say March, April level, where it was like his worst is like 76 WRC plus. So if he's just around 20 to 25% below league average, and that's kind of his bottoming out, not 45 or 24. You can really live with that type of a little bit more consistency in that profile. What you can't rely on with Nolan Gorman as a driver of offense is whenever he goes completely off the edge of the earth and goes into the 45 or the 24, you can't reasonably rely on that player to be a full-time contributor and driver of offense. And so I continue to wonder if perhaps a change of scenery is what would be best for Gorman, but also, Busch Stadium is not conducive for power hitters. It really hasn't been. I mean, I get that during the summer months, when it gets warmer, the ball flies a little bit further, yada yada yada. Okay, I get all of that, but like you can see here, March, April, May, and September, whenever the temperatures are cooler in St. Louis, he's not the same player that he is June, July, and August. And so I wonder if he needs to go somewhere that at least the park is a little more neutral. Maybe the team is a little bit like, if it's not going to work in St. Louis, maybe a team that's a little more comparable to where the Cardinals are right now in their build, and he gets the opportunity to just play every day. And I wonder if teams out there would still have, what level of interest in him. And it continues to frustrate me,
Yeah.
the level of upside that some of the top prospects that have came through in recent seasons all kind of have the same thing in common. When you think about Jordan Walker, when you think about Dylan Carlson, when you think about Nolan Gorman, when you think about, all these young hitters who ascended up and really, I don't know if they didn't get enough instruction, if they didn't make the necessary, if they didn't learn how to make the necessary adjustments in the minor leagues. We know that the Cardinals player development process really fell off after COVID, and whenever most of these players were in their quote unquote like finishing stages as prospects. And so I continue to wonder a little bit, you know, would the Cardinals benefit most from kind of clearing out those players that, excuse me, didn't unfortunately benefit from the lack of player development that was in place before, and the Cardinals just kind of like, clean slate with players who did go through this a better, stronger player development process that they're now developing. If you'll like start to see better results than the ones we've had over the last 5 to 6 seasons because of the player development process that was in place with the previous regime. And so it's just something that I kind of kick around in my head.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Gabe?
Well, I mean, to some extent, I think that's kind of what they're doing, because I don't think like there's a couple guys in the minors who, if Gorman doesn't work out, can take his place. Maybe not immediately, but in the near future. You mentioned Jesus Baez obviously has some development to do. I am kind of encouraged because you mentioned earlier that his issue is that he like chases too much and stuff, and we have a major league example of us being successful with that kind of development with Alec Burleson. They got similar issues, so hopefully whatever worked with Burleson can work with Baez. But also Daniil Ortiz is also kind of a third baseman. He plays some first base too. And I think for now, obviously, and you would agree that it makes sense to give Gorman another year. But even if he breaks out, so to speak, they might end up trading him because he's sort of losing.
I agree with that fully.
He's sort of losing team control years, and he kind of feels like, and I've always been kind of a defender of Gorman. He kind of feels like Tyler O'Neill to me, where
I'm glad you said that.
Where it seems like he's always going to have peaks and valleys. Where some years he might look like a star, and some years he doesn't look like he belongs as a starter. And I don't know if that'll change even if he has a good year, honestly. So why not capitalize if he does finally break out? Because at this point, right now he's 3 years and 114 days of service time, which means if he breaks out, the Cardinals get 2 more years with him. That's not a lot.
As he would be entering his peak physical prime years as well.
Right. And also, I would not extend him. It seems like a risky player to extend.
I agree.
So I feel like the most obvious move is to capitalize if he breaks out. So to some extent, no matter how this year goes, you could look at it as the determination we're making with Gorman is, do we get value from him when he breaks out, or do we just let him go for essentially nothing or literally nothing if he has no value in the market, which might be likely if he has another below 100 weighted runs created plus. But yeah, so I almost think, no matter how this year goes, he might be just a placeholder anyway. Because he just gives me Tyler O'Neill vibes, where even if he works out, it's just going to be, we don't know if this is the year where he's going to be top 5 in MVP voting, or if he's going to just strike out 35% of the time. So hopefully,
I'm so glad that You keep referencing Tyler O'Neill because I think that is so reminiscent of that situation. And I think that, as the Cardinals are forward thinking, that if like Gorman breaking out his best case scenario, because I don't think that that's somebody they're going to build around, but I think that it's somebody they will try to extract max value for. He'll have the same amount of control remaining that Donovan does this current offseason, next offseason. And so if you think that the Cardinals should be getting a substantial return for Donovan now, imagine what you could potentially get for now. Obviously, Donovan has track record. He has positional versatility. There are other things that make him an attractive target, but same amount of control. If you're still kind of unsure about, how long this build is going to take, Nolan Gorman then falls into that level of service time where you're starting to run out, like the clock is starting to run out, and there are other teams out there that might think that he's one of those last pieces they need to get them over the top to get them to where they want to go. And I think that he has a very consequential 2026 ahead of him in terms of his career and in terms of like potentially what the trajectory is for the St. Louis Cardinals. Gabe, do you have any closing thoughts tonight, as we are now running really, really long because of my technical difficulties, which I do apologize for?
Do we want to talk sort of position battles about the likelihood or unlikelihood of Jimmy Crooks making the MLB roster?
I tell you what, why don't we save that discussion for whenever we have. So like I'm going to talk about in just a couple minutes about some of the upcoming guests we have on. Why don't we save that for an upcoming guest? Yep. Thank you for being here tonight, Gabe. I do really appreciate it. And again, I do apologize for my technical issues over here. This is something that we will get resolved in the coming weeks to make sure that we are putting out the best product possible for you all. But again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully we will be joined by CBS sports writer RJ Anderson next week. We have Belleville News Democrat beat writer Jeff Jones scheduled for the 15th. That's whenever we'll talk about Jimmy Crooks and the position battles, as we will have boots on the ground Jeff Jones there to kind of discuss and talk through those. And then rounding out the end of the month, we will have Nate and Ben from the Talking About Birds podcast on the 22nd. So we're very excited for baseball, as we too are in the best shapes of our lives as we inch closer and closer back to warm St. Louis weather and the return of Cardinals baseball. We will talk to you all next week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.